The wind screamed through the fence slats like a wounded animal. Emma Grace Holloway's breath crystallized midair, tiny clouds freezing to the scarf wrapped twice around her thin neck. Snow swirled thick as wool, turning the world into a white void where sky and ground became one. She could barely see 3 feet ahead, but the black iron gate loomed there. Salvation or death? She couldn't tell which. Her boots cracked through ice crust with each staggering step. Frozen fingers clutched the porcelain doll to her chest. It felt wrong, too heavy, something rattling inside that shouldn't be there. Papa's last gift. The only thing left. 4 hours earlier, Thornwood's men had dragged her from the schoolhouse by her coat collar. 23 children pressed faces to frosted windows, watching. The school marm had protested, voice rising until the bank clerk shoved legal papers in her face. Vagrant orphan, no legal guardian, bank's receivership. Emma had stumbled on the frozen boardwalk. Her knee split open on impact. Blood on snow, bright as a scream. The men reached for her arms. She'd run instead, straight into the gathering storm. Now her lips were going numb. She fell once, twice. The third time, she couldn't get back up. The gate was right there. 10 feet, 5, she crawled. Lamplight spilled gold across white when the ranch house door opened. A man's silhouette, broad-shouldered, filled the frame. Emma's vision tunneled. The doll slipped from her grip. "Help," she whispered, but the wind stole the word. Augustus Brennan's boots crunched through snow. He lifted her like she weighed nothing at all, and his voice rumbled deep in his chest. "You're safe now, child, on my word." The door shut behind them. Everything went black. Warmth hit Emma's face like a physical thing. The fire crackled and popped in the stone hearth, close enough she could feel heat on her frozen cheeks. Wool blankets, rough but clean, wrapped around her shoulders. Someone was peeling off her boots, gentle hands working at ice-crusted lace. "Frostbite on 3 toes," a gravelly voice said. "Could be worse. You got here just in time, girl." Emma's eyes cracked open. An older man, with silver whiskers and spectacles perched on his nose, knelt beside the settee where she lay. His fingers prodded her left foot, clinical and quick. "Doc Warren," the deeper voice came from behind her, the man who'd carried her in. "She gonna keep the toes?" "If we're careful, no walking for 3 days minimum." Doc Warren pulled a brown bottle from his bag, uncorked it. The sharp smell of carbolic acid filled the air. "This'll sting, child, but it'll save what needs saving." It burned like fire. Emma bit down on her lip hard enough to taste copper but didn't cry out. Papa had taught her that. Pain was just information. You listened to it, then you decided what to do next. The big man moved into her line of sight, late 50s, maybe 60, face weathered like old leather, deep lines around his eyes that spoke of squinting into sun and wind for decades. But those eyes were kind, gray as smoke, patient as stone. "Name's Augustus Brennan," he said. "Folks call me Gus. This is my ranch. You're safe here, understand?" Emma's throat worked. "The doll," she rasped. "Where's—" "Right here." Gus held it up, porcelain painted to look like a fine lady in a blue dress. Though one arm had a hairline crack Emma knew by heart. Held on to it the whole way in. Must be important. "It's all I have left." The words came out small. "Of Papa." Something shifted in Gus's expression. Pain, maybe, recognition. But he just nodded and set the doll on the table beside her, within reach. "Then we'll keep it safe. You got a name?" "Emma Grace Holloway." The room went very still. Doc Warren's hands paused on her foot. Gus's face went carefully blank. The way men's faces did when they were working hard not to show what they felt. "Holloway," Gus repeated, slow. "Thomas Holloway's girl." Emma's chest tightened. "You knew my papa?" "Long time ago." Gus's voice had gone rough. "I'm sorry for your loss, child. Your father was a good man." Before Emma could ask more, boots stomped on the porch outside. The door swung open without a knock, letting in a blast of cold air and swirling snow. 2 men entered, one in a long wool coat with a marshal's star pinned to his chest, the other in expensive city clothes that looked out of place this far from civilization. The city man's eyes found Emma immediately. His smile was all teeth, no warmth. "There she is," Silas Thornwood said. His voice was smooth as oil on water. "The lost lamb. Thank Providence you found her, Brennan. I've been searching for hours." Gus stood slowly, placing himself between Emma and the doorway. "This is private property, Thornwood. State your business or get out." "My business is the child." Thornwood pulled folded papers from his coat. "I'm executor of the Orphan Receivership Program, appointed by the Territorial Bank. Miss Holloway is a ward of the state, legally under my guardianship until she comes of age." And Marshal Wade Garrett shifted uncomfortably, snow melting off his hat brim. "It's true, Gus. Papers are in order. I checked them myself." "She's 9 years old and half frozen." Doc Warren's voice cut sharp. "She's not going anywhere for at least 3 days. Medical necessity overrides legal paperwork. Thornwood's smile thinned. Of course, I'm not a monster doctor. The child can recover here. His gaze slid to Gus. I'm prepared to offer compensation for your trouble. Say $500 for feed, lodging, medical care. Gus's jaw tightened. $500. A year's wages for most men. Enough to buy silence, compliance, the looking away that greased the wheels of frontier corruption. He crossed to the fireplace, took the poker, stirred the logs until flames leapt high. Then he pulled the bills from Thornwood's outstretched hand, held them over the fire, and let go. The money blackened and curled, consumed in seconds. This child stays, Gus said quietly. Get off my land. Thornwood's face went cold as January stone. You just made a terrible mistake, Brennan. 3 days of rest turned Emma's cheeks from blue-white to pink. She still limped when she walked, but Doc Warren pronounced her out of danger. Gus had set her up in the small bedroom off the kitchen, his daughter's room once, though he didn't talk about that. The quilt smelled like cedar and lavender, and at night Emma could hear the low murmur of ranch hands in the bunkhouse, the soft lowing of cattle in the near pasture. For the first time since Papa died, she slept without nightmares. On the 4th day, Gus took her into town. Chin's Mercantile sat on the corner of Main and Church, a 2-story building with glass windows that caught the weak winter sun. A bell chimed when they entered, and warm air scented with coffee beans and dried herbs washed over them. Bolts of fabric lined one wall, barrels of flour and sugar the other, and behind the counter stood a woman with black hair pinned in a neat bun and eyes that saw everything. Brennan. Rose Chin's voice carried the faint accent of someone who'd learned English as a second tongue, but spoke it better than most who'd been born to it. And who's this young lady? Emma Holloway, Gus said. She needs a new dress, something warm, and boots that fit. Rose's gaze swept over Emma. The borrowed men's shirt rolled at the cuffs. The 2 large trousers cinched with rope. No judgment in her eyes, just quick assessment. Come with me, child. She led Emma to the back corner where ready-made dresses hung on hooks. Her fingers moved swift and sure, pulling down a dark blue wool dress with practical buttons and a high collar. Try this. There's a screen for privacy. While Emma changed, she heard Rose's voice drop low, speaking to Gus in tones meant not to carry. But the Mercantile was quiet, and sound traveled. You know what you're doing? Rose asked, keeping a child safe. Thornwood doesn't forget insults. You burned his money in front of witnesses. Good. Want him to remember. A pause, the rustle of paper. There have been others, Mr. Brennan, other orphans whose land went to the bank's receivership, 12 in the past 18 months. 12? Gus's voice sharpened. All the same pattern. Parents die, child becomes ward of the state. Thornwood appointed guardian. 90 days later, the land's declared abandoned. Bank sells it at auction. Thornwood's the buyer every time, at 1/10 of market value. That's legal theft. Legal is the key word. Rose's voice turned bitter. I keep records, names, dates, property values. But what good are records when the marshal won't look at them? When the territorial judge plays cards with Thornwood every Thursday night? Emma stepped out from behind the screen. The dress fit perfectly, hem just brushing her ankles. Rose's expression softened, and she produced a pair of sturdy leather boots from beneath the counter. These 2, she said. No charge for the boots. Consider it my contribution to making sure child number 13 doesn't lose everything. I can pay, Gus started, but Rose waved him off. You can pay for the dress. The boots are between me and my conscience. She knelt, helping Emma lace them up. Her hands were small but strong, calloused from years of lifting crates and balancing ledgers. You're a brave girl, Emma Holloway. Don't let anyone tell you different. Emma's throat tightened. Thank you, ma'am. Rose stood, moved back behind the counter. She pulled a heavy ledger from beneath it, the kind with a lock on the side, and opened it to a page marked with red ribbon. Her finger traced down a list of names, dates, numbers. She showed it to Gus, but angled it away from Emma. When I can prove this won't cost me everything, Rose said softly. I'll help however I can. But my husband's dead 3 years. This store is all that stands between me and begging, and Thornwood holds the note on this building. Gus nodded slowly. I understand. I hope you do. Rose closed the ledger, locked it, slid it back under the counter, because mercy's expensive in Montana territory. And Thornwood's the kind of man who makes you pay in blood for every kindness. The afternoon sun was already slanting low when they reached Thornwood's bank. The building dominated the east end of Main Street, 2 stories of red brick with white columns that belonged in Boston, not the frontier. Inside, gaslight sconces burned even in daytime, and the floor was polished marble that clicked beneath their boots. Thornwood's office occupied the back corner. Through the frosted glass door, Emma could see his silhouette hunched over paperwork. Gus knocked once, didn't wait for an answer, and walked in. Brennan. Thornwood didn't look up from the deed he was reviewing. His pen scratched across paper, the sound sharp in the quiet room. And little Miss Holloway. Come to surrender to proper guardianship, I hope? Come to see your proof of legal authority, Gus said. Thornwood smiled. He opened a drawer, pulled out a folder thick with documents, and spread them across his mahogany desk. Marshal Garrett stood in the corner. Emma hadn't seen him there at first. His face unhappy but resigned. Orphan Receivership Act of 1881, Thornwood said, tapping the first page. Grants the Territorial Bank authority to assume guardianship of minor children whose parents die intestate or without clear provision for care. He slid another document forward. Death certificate for Thomas Holloway, dated November 3rd, 1882. Cause of death, accidental drowning. Emma's hands clenched. Not drowning. Murder. She'd seen the knife, seen Thornwood's face in the moonlight at the creek. But her throat closed up, tongue frozen. Thornwood pulled out a third paper, this one with an official seal and signature in careful script. And here, guardianship deed signed by the child's mother, Margaret Holloway, 3 days before her own tragic death. She appointed me executor of her late husband's estate and guardian of their daughter, knowing I would ensure the child's proper upbringing and education. Gus took the paper, studied it. His face gave nothing away. This signature is legally witnessed and notarized, Thornwood interrupted smoothly. Marshal Garrett has reviewed all documentation. Haven't you, Marshal? Garrett shifted his weight, looked at his boots. Papers appear in order, Gus. I got no legal grounds to challenge them. There. Thornwood gathered the documents, slid them back into the folder. Now, I'm a reasonable man. Miss Holloway may remain at your ranch until she's fully recovered. But come Monday morning, I expect her delivered to the church orphanage where she belongs. Failure to comply constitutes kidnapping under territorial law. He leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steepled. You have 48 hours, Brennan. Use them wisely. Emma found her voice at last. You killed my papa. The room went silent. Thornwood's smile didn't waver. Child's grief, he said softly, manifests in many unfortunate ways. Delusions, accusations, all the more reason she needs proper institutional care. I saw you, Emma's voice cracked. At the creek, you had a knife. Emma. Gus's hand settled on her shoulder, firm but gentle. Not here. Mr. Brennan is right. Marshal Garrett's voice was tired. Even if the child believes what she's saying, it's not evidence. Just the word of a traumatized 9-year-old against a respected businessman. Thornwood stood, walked around his desk. He crouched before Emma, bringing his face level with hers. This close, she could smell his cologne, something expensive and foreign, and see the cold calculation in his eyes. You'll learn, little one, he said quietly. Same as your papa learned. In Montana Territory, property beats virtue every time. The sooner you accept that, the easier your life becomes. He straightened, turned to Gus. 48 hours. Don't make me send men to collect her by force. Outside, the temperature had dropped with the sun. Emma's new boots crunched through snow as they walked to the wagon. Gus helped her up to the seat. Didn't speak until they were rolling out of town. Did you? He asked finally. See him that night? Emma nodded, not trusting her voice. Tell me what happened. So she did. The whole story spilled out. Papa saying he had business at the creek, telling her to wait in the wagon, how she'd gotten worried when he didn't come back, how she'd crept down to the water and seen Thornwood's face in the moonlight, seen the struggle, seen Papa fall, how she'd run back to the wagon and driven it home alone, 6 miles in the dark, and found the house empty because Mama had died, giving birth 3 months before, and there was no one left. Gus listened in silence. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. The wagon wheels creaked. A distant wolf howled. Monday morning, Emma whispered. What happens Monday morning? Gus's jaw set hard. We'll see. But his hands were white-knuckled on the reins. That night, the bunkhouse felt warmer than the main house. 4 ranch hands sat around the potbelly stove, playing cards and drinking coffee that had been on the boil so long it could strip paint. They looked up when Gus brought Emma in, but nobody objected. Boys, this is Emma, Gus said. She's staying with us a while. Figure she ought to learn something useful. And the youngest hand couldn't be more than 19. With straw-colored hair and a crooked grin, set down his cards. Can you tie knots, miss? Emma shook her head. Well then. He produced a length of rope from his pocket, worn soft from years of use. Every rancher's daughter ought to know her knots. Come here. His name was Billy. He showed her the bowline first, his hands patient as he looped and threaded. Rabbit comes out of the hole, runs around the tree, goes back in the hole. See? Emma tried. Her fingers fumbled. Unused to the work, Billy just smiled and showed her again. The other hands joined in. Old Pete demonstrated the clove hitch. Dutch, a broad-shouldered man with a thick accent, showed her the sheet bend. They didn't talk about Thornwood or guardianship papers or Monday morning. They just passed rope between calloused hands and taught a 9-year-old girl the practical magic of knots that held fast. Emma's doll sat on the table beside her, its painted face catching lamplight. She'd set it down to free both hands for the rope work. When she tried the bowline for the 5th time and finally got it right, Billy whooped and Pete clapped her shoulder. "There you go, miss. Now you're a real ranch hand." And for the first time in months, Emma laughed. The sound startled her. She'd almost forgotten what joy felt like. She reached for her doll, meaning to show it her accomplishment like Papa used to let her show him things. Her hand caught the table edge. The doll tipped, fell. It hit the floor with a crack. Everyone froze. Emma dropped to her knees, heart hammering. The doll's porcelain head had split along an existing hairline fracture, and through the gap she could see paper, folded tight and wedged inside the hollow body. "What in the—" Billy started, but Emma was already pulling at the crack, widening it with shaking fingers. The porcelain gave way. More cracks spiderwebbed across the painted face. She reached inside and pulled out a document, yellowed at the edges but still crisp. Official seals stamped in red wax, dense text in careful script. Gus took it from her hands, moved closer to the lamp. His eyes scanned the page once, twice. The color drained from his face. "Lord have mercy," he breathed. "What is it?" Pete asked. "Land patent." Gus's voice was hollow. "Original deed for 2,400 acres along Sweetwater Creek. Issued to Thomas Holloway, April 1879. Legal and binding under territorial law." Emma stared at the broken doll in her hands. "Papa told me to keep it safe. He said—" Her voice caught. "He said if anything happened to him, the doll would take care of me. I thought he meant for comfort. I didn't know." Gus kept reading, his lips moving silently. Then he stopped. His finger traced a line near the bottom of the document. "There's a clause here," he said slowly. "Special provision. Says if Thomas Holloway dies before his daughter reaches majority, guardianship and land stewardship passes to—" He looked up, eyes meeting Emma's. "To Augustus Brennan, business partner, in trust until the child comes of age." The bunkhouse went silent except for the stove's crackling. "You," Emma whispered. "Papa wanted you to take care of me." Gus sat down hard on the nearest bench. His hands trembled on the patent. "I didn't know. Thomas and I were partners, years back, before you were born. Cattle venture, that went well enough. We both made money. But we went separate ways after. I never knew he'd put this in writing." "This changes everything," Billy said. "Don't it? Legal trumps legal." "Maybe." Gus folded the patent carefully, like it might disintegrate. "Or maybe Thornwood's got an answer for this too. Man doesn't build an empire on fraud without having contingencies." But there was something in his voice now. Not quite hope, but not defeat either. Something harder, more determined. Sunday morning broke cold and clear. The circuit preacher only came through Sweetwater twice a month, and this was his week. The church, a simple white building with a crooked steeple, stood at the north end of town, close enough to hear the creek running even through winter ice. Inside, the pews were half full. Ranchers and their wives, shopkeepers, a few miners in from the hills. Rose Chen sat near the back, her son beside her. Thornwood occupied the front row, dressed in black like he was already in mourning. Father Declan O'Malley stood at the pulpit, white hair wild around his ruddy face, Irish accent thick as morning fog. He'd been riding this circuit for 20 years, baptizing babies and burying the dead, and his eyes missed nothing. When Gus entered with Emma, conversation stopped, heads turned. Thornwood's smile was thin as a knife blade. Father O'Malley's sermon that morning was about shepherds and lost lambs, about men who claimed to protect the flock while devouring it from within. His gaze kept drifting to Thornwood, pointed as a blade. After the service, Gus approached the priest outside, while Emma waited by the wagon. She watched them talk, Gus's stance urgent, the father's head nodding slowly. Money changed hands. Not a bribe, Emma thought. Payment for services, for something. When Gus returned, Father O'Malley walked with him. "Miss Emma Holloway," the priest said, his voice warm as summer sun. "I baptized you, child, 9 years ago, this coming March. Held you myself while your mother wept with joy." His eyes softened. "I'm sorry for your losses, both of them." "Thank you, Father. Mr. Brennan tells me you've had some trouble. Legal matters regarding guardianship." He pulled a small, leather-bound book from his coat. "I keep records, you see. Baptisms, marriages, deaths. Every soul that passes through my care gets written down proper." He opened the book, found a page marked with ribbon. "Here. Margaret Holloway, née Burke, died in childbirth, August 15th, 1882. I performed the last rites myself." His finger moved down the page, which makes certain recent documents rather puzzling. What documents? Emma asked. Gus answered. Thornwood has a guardianship deed. Says your mother signed it 3 days before she died, appointing him your legal guardian. Father O'Malley's eyebrows rose. Does he now? How remarkable. Considering Margaret Holloway was unconscious from blood loss 3 days before her death. I was at her bedside. She never woke. Something fierce and bright kindled in Gus's eyes. You'd testify to that? The priest closed his book slowly. Breaking the seal of pastoral confidence is no small thing, Mr. Brennan. The church takes a dim view of priests who gossip about the dead. This isn't gossip, Father. This is justice. Is it? O'Malley looked at Emma, then back to Gus. Or is it vengeance? Because I knew Thomas Holloway, too. Good man, godly man. And his death... The priest's mouth tightened. His death was no accident. I heard his confession 2 days before he died. He told me he'd discovered something, evidence of fraud, said he was going to confront someone powerful. Emma's breath caught. Did he say who? No. Father O'Malley's voice was gentle but firm. And I cannot break the seal even now, but I can say this. If there are legal proceedings, if a judge demands church records regarding births and deaths and the signing of documents, then I am bound by law to provide them. Civil authority supersedes pastoral privilege in matters of fraud. He handed the book to Gus. Keep it safe. When the time comes, and Mr. Brennan, I believe that time is coming soon, you'll know what to do with it. Gus took the book like it was made of gold. Thank you, Father. Don't thank me yet. O'Malley glanced toward the church where Thornwood was still shaking hands and playing the pillar of the community. When you fight men like that, they don't just defend themselves, they destroy. Make sure you're ready for what's coming. We will be, Gus said. The priest blessed them both, then walked back to the church. Emma watched him go, feeling the weight of hope settling in her chest. It hurt, that hope, like frostbitten toes coming back to feeling. Can I call you Papa? She asked suddenly. Gus froze. His throat worked. Not yet, Emma, but maybe... He looked down at her, and she saw the same hurt hope in his eyes. Maybe if we survive this, you can ask me again. She nodded. It wasn't yes, but it wasn't no either. It was enough, for now. Monday came too fast. The deadline loomed like a shadow, and by mid-morning, Gus knew Thornwood wouldn't wait for nightfall. Emma stood at the ranch house window, watching the road. Her new dress was clean, her boots laced tight. The broken doll sat on the table behind her, porcelain pieces carefully arranged like a body laid out for burial. The land patent was locked in Gus's safe. They're coming, she said quietly. Gus moved to the window. 4 riders approached from town, moving at an easy canter. Thornwood, in the lead on a tall black gelding, 3 hired men flanking him. Not quite a posse, but close enough to make the threat clear. Behind Gus, the ranch hands gathered on the porch. Billy checked his rifle. Pete spat tobacco juice into the dirt. Dutch cracked his knuckles, face grim. But before Thornwood could reach the gate, more riders appeared. Rose Chin's wagon rolled up from the south road, her son driving. Behind it came 6 more townspeople. The blacksmith, 2 shopkeepers, a widow named Hattie, who ran the boarding house, and old Samuel Cross, who owned the feed store. They positioned themselves along the fence line, not blocking entry but watching, bearing witness. Thornwood reined up short, clearly not expecting an audience. His jaw tightened, but his smile stayed fixed. Quite the gathering, he called out. This is a private legal matter, folks. No need for spectators. Free country, Rose said calmly. Public road. We'll watch from here. Thornwood's eyes narrowed, but he dismounted and approached the porch alone. His men stayed mounted, hands resting near their sidearms. Mr. Brennan, Thornwood said. The deadline has passed. I'm here to collect Miss Holloway and escort her to proper care. She's got proper care right here, Gus replied. You're not her legal guardian. Funny thing about that. Gus pulled the land patent from his coat pocket, unfolded it. Seems Thomas Holloway had different ideas. This here's the original deed to his property. Got a clause naming me guardian, if anything happened to him. Thornwood's composure cracked for just an instant. His eyes flicked to the document, and Emma saw something like fear flash across his face before the mask slammed back down. Interesting, Thornwood said smoothly. May I see it? You can read it from there. Thornwood stepped closer, squinting at the text. Emma watched his face carefully. When his gaze hit this bottom section, the guardian clause, his hand trembled. Just once. Just enough. This is years old, Thornwood said. Predates the mother's guardianship appointment by 3 years. Her wishes supersede any prior arrangement. Her wishes? Gus's voice went cold. You mean the document she supposedly signed while unconscious on her deathbed? That's a serious accusation. Father O'Malley was there. He kept records. The fence line had grown. More people arriving, drawn by curiosity or conscience. Emma couldn't tell which. 15 now. 20. The blacksmith's wife. The schoolmarm. Even Marshall Garrett, looking uncomfortable but standing apart from Thornwood's men. Thornwood's voice rose, playing to the crowd now. This is absurd. The child is an orphan with no means of support. Mr. Brennan is a bachelor rancher with no experience raising children. I'm offering a proper orphanage, education, a future. You're offering theft, Rose called out. She stood in her wagon bed now, holding her locked ledger. 12 orphans in 18 months, Mr. Thornwood. All lost their land to your receivership. All sold at auction to buyers who sold to you within the week. You want to tell these good people that's coincidence? Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Thornwood's face flushed. Speculation and jealousy, he snapped. I won't dignify. I saw you. Emma's voice cut through the noise like a knife. She stepped onto the porch, hands clenched at her sides. At the creek, you killed my papa. The crowd went silent. Thornwood's laugh was cold. The ravings of a traumatized child. Marshall, surely you don't give credence to... I saw the knife, Emma continued, voice shaking but clear. I saw you standing over him. I heard you say it should have stayed out of my business, Thomas. Then you pushed him in the water and held him down till he stopped moving. Lies. But Thornwood's voice had lost its smoothness. Sweat beaded his forehead despite the cold. Marshall Garrett, arrest this man for kidnapping, now. The marshal looked at Emma, looked at the crowd, looked at his boots. Even if it's true, Garrett said slowly, it's a child's word against yours, Silas. No physical evidence, no other witnesses. A judge would never convict on that alone. There. Thornwood straightened his coat. The law is clear. Miss Holloway comes with me. By force, if necessary. His men dismounted, started walking toward the porch. Billy and Pete raised their rifles. Don't, Gus said quietly. To his men, not Thornwood's. The ranch hands hesitated but lowered their weapons. Emma felt her world crumbling. The patent wasn't enough. Father O'Malley's records weren't enough. Her testimony wasn't enough. Truth didn't matter when the law was written by men like Thornwood. She looked at Gus, desperate. Please. His face was carved stone. I won't let you go to prison for me, child. Won't have blood spilled in my yard. He turned to Thornwood. You want her, you take her. But know this, I'll fight you in every court, use every legal means, spend every dollar I have. You haven't won. You've just delayed losing. Thornwood's smile returned. Noble, but ultimately futile. He gestured to his men. Bring the girl. Emma's legs wouldn't move. She stood frozen while Thornwood's hired gun, a scarred man with dead eyes, climbed the porch steps and reached for her arm. His fingers closed around her wrist, and the world shifted. Emma looked past him, past Thornwood, to where Rose Chin had climbed down from her wagon, to where Father O'Malley had arrived on his old mare, black coat flapping in the wind, to where 27 townspeople now stood witness, faces troubled, consciences waking. She thought of Papa's last words, the doll will take care of you, and she understood. Property beat virtue, paper beat truth, but community might beat them both. The hired gun pulled Emma toward the steps. She stumbled, caught herself, refused to cry. Gus's face was granite, but his hands shook. Thornwood mounted his horse, satisfaction radiating from him like heat. A pleasure doing business, Brennan. Perhaps next time you'll know better than to interfere in legal matters. They were halfway to the gate when Rose Chen stepped into the road. Wait, she said. Thornwood reined up, irritation flashing. Mrs. Chen, move aside. I want to give the child something. Rose approached slowly, hands visible and empty. She knelt before Emma, meeting her eyes. Your papa used to buy flour from me. Every month, regular as clockwork. Good man. Paid his debts on time. She pressed something into Emma's palm. A piece of hard candy, peppermint striped. For courage, Rose said quietly. Then louder, so the crowd could hear. A child should have something sweet, even on the hardest days. Other people moved forward then. The blacksmith's wife with a knitted scarf. Old Samuel with a worn coin. For luck, little miss. The schoolmarm with a hair ribbon. One by one, they approached, pressing small gifts into Emma's hands until she couldn't hold them all. Thornwood's horse shifted, uneasy. This is ridiculous. Move aside, all of you. But they didn't. They formed a loose circle around Emma and the hired gun, not threatening, not blocking, just present, bearing witness to what was being done. Marshall Garrett cleared his throat. Silas, maybe we should. Should what? Thornwood's voice cracked like a whip. These people have no legal standing. The child is mine, by law. By your law, Father O'Malley said. He dismounted, moving through the crowd with his worn Bible under one arm. But there's another law, older, written on hearts instead of paper. Spare me the sermon, Father. No sermon, just a question. The priest stopped beside Rose. This guardianship deed, the one supposedly signed by Margaret Holloway. You have it with you? Thornwood's eyes narrowed. In my office. Pity. I'd be curious to see the signature. Compare it to the documents in my baptismal records. Father O'Malley's voice was gentle, but his gaze was steel. Margaret had beautiful handwriting, very distinctive. Learned it from nuns back in Philadelphia. The crowd pressed closer, sensing something. What are you implying? Thornwood demanded. Nothing yet. But when this matter goes before a judge, and Mr. Brennan assures me it will, I'll be happy to provide my records for comparison. Church documentation is admissible evidence in territorial court. Thornwood's face went red. You'd break the seal of confession for this? No seal protects forgery, Mr. Thornwood. Civil fraud supersedes pastoral privilege. You should know that, being a man of legal precision. For the first time, Thornwood looked uncertain. His gaze swept the crowd, 27 faces watching, judging. Not enough to stop him legally, but enough to start talking. Enough to ask questions. Questions led to investigations. Investigations led to audits. And Thornwood's empire, Emma suddenly understood, was built on secrets that couldn't survive scrutiny. Fine, Thornwood said abruptly. Keep the brat for now, but this isn't over, Brennan. Not by half. He yanked his horse around, spurring hard. His men followed. The hired gun released Emma's wrist and backed away, clearly wanting no part of whatever was coming. When they'd disappeared down the road, Emma's legs finally gave out. Gus caught her before she hit the ground, lifting her like he had that first night in the blizzard. You're safe, he murmured. You're safe, child. This time, she believed him. That evening, Emma sat at Gus's kitchen table while he heated coffee on the stove. The broken doll lay between them, a casualty of truth-telling. I'm sorry about your doll, Gus said. Emma shook her head. Papa meant for it to break. That's why he hid the patent inside. He knew someday I'd need it more than I needed a toy. Gus was quiet for a long moment. Steam rose from the coffee pot, filling the kitchen with warm, bitter scent. Outside, the last light was fading, and in the distance, a cow lowed for her calf. Your father and I were partners once, Gus said finally. Long time ago. We made good money together, then split amicable when he wanted to settle down, start a family. I stayed a bachelor, kept building the ranch. We lost touch. He talked about you sometimes, Emma said. Said you were the most honest man he knew. Said if anything happened, I should find Augustus Brennan, because you do right even when it cost you. Gus's throat worked. I don't know that I've earned that. You burned Thornwood's money. You let his men take me rather than start a war. You stood up when everyone else looked away. Emma met his eyes. That's earned, I reckon. Outside, the first stars were emerging. Spring still felt far off, but the deepest cold had passed. In another month, the ice would break on the creek. In 2, green shoots would push through winter-hard ground. Can I call you Papa now? Emma asked again. Gus looked at her for a long time. Then he smiled, small, tentative, but real. Not yet, Emma Grace. But ask me again, come spring. 1 week later, notices appeared all over town. Printed on expensive paper, posted on every storefront and fence. Reward, $1,000 for information leading to the recovery of Emma Grace Holloway, kidnapped orphan, unlawfully detained by Augustus Brennan. Said individual is wanted for violation of territorial guardianship law. All citizens are encouraged to report sightings to Silas Thornwood, Territorial Bank. $1,000. 4 years' wages for a working man, enough to tempt even the honest. Emma saw how people looked at her now when Gus brought her to town. Calculating looks, weighing loyalty against rent, conscience against hunger. The blacksmith nodded, but didn't speak. The feed store owner served them quickly and didn't meet Gus's eyes. Only Rose Chen remained unchanged, greeting Emma with a smile and slipping her peppermints when Gus wasn't looking. By the second week, whispers followed them everywhere. In the mercantile, outside the church, at the livery stable where Gus boarded his horses. Kidnapper, stealing from orphans. Man that rich, why's he need a child's inheritance? The schoolmarm stopped Emma outside the general store, her face pinched with concern. Is it true, child? Is Mr. Brennan keeping you against your will? Emma's hands clenched. No, ma'am. He's protecting me. Oh, from what? From the man who murdered my father. The schoolmarm's eyes widened. She glanced around, lowered her voice. That's a serious accusation, Emma. Do you have proof? I saw it happen. Saw what exactly? And there it was, the doubt. The same look Marshall Garrett had worn. The same look everyone wore when a 9-year-old claimed to witness murder. Never mind, Emma said quietly. She walked away before the tears could come. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening, late February. The sun was setting earlier now, the days incrementally longer, but true spring still felt distant as the moon. Emma had gone to the river, not the creek where Papa died. She couldn't face that yet. But the wider channel, half a mile north, where ice still gripped the banks but water ran swift and dark in the center. She needed to think, needed to breathe air that didn't taste like other people's suspicion. She found a flat rock and sat, hugging her knees. The land patent was safe in Gus's office. Father O'Malley's records were locked in the church. Rose's ledger documented 12 stolen inheritances. They had evidence. They had truth. But Thornwood had money. And in Montana territory, money bought judges, marshals, even neighbors' silence. Maybe she should just go. Walk into town, surrender herself to the orphanage, stop making Gus's life harder, stop watching people who'd been his friends turn their backs because $1,000 was more than most folks saw in a lifetime. Thinking of running? Emma spun. Gus stood 10 feet back, hands in his coat pockets, breath fogging in the cold. How'd you know I was here? Followed your tracks. He moved closer, sat on the rock beside her. The river rushed past, relentless and dark. You gonna answer my question? Would it be easier? Emma asked. If I just left? Gus was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was rough. Easier, yes. Right? No. Everyone thinks you're a kidnapper now. They cross the street when they see you coming. Old Pete heard two men in the saloon talking about collecting that reward themselves. I know. So why keep fighting? Gus picked up a stone, turned it over in his palm. You ever hear how your father and I made our first fortune together? Emma shook her head. Cattle drive. Spring of '76. We pooled everything we had, bought 200 head, drove them to the railroad in Cheyenne. 3 months of hell, stampedes, rustlers, a river crossing that nearly drowned us both. He smiled at the memory. We got to Cheyenne with 170 head left, sold them for enough to start over proper. He threw the stone. It skipped once, twice, vanished into darkness. Last night of that drive, sitting around the fire, Thomas asked me what I'd do with my share. I said I'd build the biggest ranch in Montana. Asked him the same. You know what he said? What? Said he'd find a good woman, settle down, have a family. Said money was just a tool, but family was what made a man rich. Gus looked at Emma. He got that. The family, you were his wealth, Emma, his real fortune. And then Thornwood took it all away. Tried to. But your father was smarter than Thornwood gave him credit for. He hid that patent where no one would think to look. Named me guardian, because he knew I owed him my life from that river crossing. Knew I'd honor the debt. This isn't about debt, Emma said quietly. No, Gus's voice gentled. It stopped being about debt the moment I saw you collapse at my gate. This is about doing what's right, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. The river ice creaked, a sound like trees splitting in winter cold. But beneath it, Emma could hear water flowing. Spring coming, slow but certain. I broke Papa's doll, she said. To prove I trusted you. To show everyone the patent. I know. It's all I had left of him, and I broke it. Gus put his arm around her shoulders. No, child. You used it the way he meant it to be used. That's not breaking. That's honoring. Your father didn't give you a toy. He gave you a weapon. And you drew it at exactly the right time. Emma leaned against his side. He was solid, warm, real, like the rock beneath them, like the river that kept flowing no matter how hard winter tried to freeze it solid. Can I? She started. Spring, Gus interrupted gently. Ask me in spring, Emma Grace. When this is over and we're both still standing, ask me then. She nodded against his coat. They sat until the last light died, watching the river carry winter away. The confession came 3 nights later, in the dark hours when truth has nowhere left to hide. Emma woke to the sound of breaking glass. She sat up in bed, heart hammering, listening. Footsteps in the main room, the scrape of a chair, then nothing. She crept to her door, opened it a crack. Gus sat at the kitchen table, a whiskey bottle beside him, half empty now, and from the slump of his shoulders he'd drunk most of it tonight. The lamp burned low, casting his face in shadow and amber light. In his hands he held something small. Sarah's compass, Emma had heard him call it once. His dead wife's gift. I'm sorry, Thomas, Gus said to the empty room. His voice was thick, slurred at the edges. I'm so goddamn sorry. Emma pushed the door open wider. The hinges creaked. Gus's head snapped up. His eyes were red-rimmed, haunted. When he saw her, something in his face crumpled. You should be sleeping, he managed. So should you. Emma crossed the room, sat in the chair opposite him. The whiskey smell was sharp, medicinal. What are you sorry for? For a long moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he set down the compass, pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes. I killed your father, he said. The words hung in the cold air like smoke. Emma's breath caught. What? Not with my hands, but I might as well have. Gus reached for the bottle, poured another measure into his glass. His hands shook. That cattle drive I told you about, the river crossing, Thomas saved my life that day. I got swept downstream, horse went under, and he rode in after me. Damn near drowned himself pulling me to shore. He drank, grimaced. After we made our money, went our separate ways, I kept building, kept wanting more. Bigger ranch, more cattle, more land. Thomas settled down with your mother, had you, lived simple. Gus's laugh was bitter. I thought he was wasting his potential, told him so last time we spoke. Said he could have been somebody if he'd kept his ambition. When was that? Emma asked quietly. 5 years ago, he came to me, wanted to partner up again. Said he'd found something, evidence that Silas Thornwood was running a land fraud scheme. Wanted my help exposing it. Gus's voice went hollow. I told him to let it go. Told him men like Thornwood were too powerful to fight. Told him to think about his family, about you, about what he'd lose if he made enemies of the territorial elite. Emma's chest tightened. What did he say? Said some things are worth losing everything for. Said if good men stay silent, evil men win. Gus looked at her, eyes bright with unshed tears. He walked out of here. And I never saw him again. 3 months later, he was dead. The lamp flickered. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. It's not your fault, Emma said. Isn't it? If I'd helped him, if I'd stood with him instead of counseling cowardice, maybe he'd still be alive. Maybe Thornwood wouldn't have dared. Maybe Thornwood would have killed you both. Emma's voice was firm. Maybe I'd be alone with nobody. Maybe the patent would have been found and destroyed. Maybe we'd both be dead, and Thornwood would still be stealing from orphans. Gus stared at her. Papa made his choice, Emma continued. He knew the risk. He did it anyway because that's who he was. And he left me to you because he trusted you, not the man you were 5 years ago, but the man he knew you'd become. I don't deserve that trust. Neither did I deserve a father who'd die for what's right, or a guardian who'd burn a $1,000 reward rather than give me up. Emma reached across the table, put her small hand over his calloused one. But we don't get to choose what we deserve, Mr. Brennan. We just get to choose what we do with what we're given. Gus's face twisted. He pulled his hand back, stood abruptly, paced to the window. His shoulders heaved once, twice. When he turned back, tears tracked through the gray stubble on his cheeks. I don't know how to do this, he said hoarsely. Be what you need, what Thomas wanted me to be. Oh, you're already doing it. I'm failing. Thornwood's winning. The whole town thinks I'm a criminal. We've got evidence, but no judge who'll hear it. No way to force a trial. No, we'll find a way. How? Gus's voice cracked. How, Emma? I've spent 3 weeks trying to get a hearing. Every lawyer in 200 miles won't touch it. The territorial judge is Thornwood's Friday night poker partner. The federal marshal is 3 months away. By the time anyone with real authority arrives, Thornwood will have buried us in paperwork and technicalities. Emma stood, walked to him. At 9 years old, she barely came up to his chest, but she looked him in the eye anyway. Papa told me something once, she said. After Mama died, and I asked why God let bad things happen. He said God doesn't stop every bad thing. That'd take away our choice. But he does put people in the right place at the right time. People who can choose to help. I'm not. You are. Emma's voice was certain. You were at your gate when I collapsed. Father O'Malley happened to keep perfect records. Rose happened to track every orphan seizure. The whole town happened to show up when Thornwood came for me. She smiled slightly. That's not coincidence, Mr. Brennan. That's pieces falling into place. For what? For whatever comes next. Gus wiped his eyes roughly. You sound like your father. Good. He was a smart man. Despite everything, Gus laughed, a broken sound, but real. He sat back down, pushed the whiskey bottle away. Smarter than me, that's certain. Maybe. But he couldn't have done what you're doing. He was brave. But you... Emma paused, finding the words. You're brave even though you're scared. That's harder. The next morning, Rose Chen arrived before breakfast. Her face was tight with worry, and she clutched a telegram in her hands. It's happening, she said. Thornwood's filed formal charges, kidnapping, custodial interference, fraud. Says you forged that land patent, Gus. Claims Thomas Holloway never had a partner. Gus took the telegram, read it twice. Trial date? Week from Monday, Judge Sutherland presiding. Sutherland. Gus's jaw clenched. Thornwood's bought man. There's more. Rose's voice dropped. The trial's set for the courthouse. But Thornwood's changed the location. Says the courthouse is under repair, which is a lie. He's moved it to the cattle auction grounds. Emma frowned. Why there? Public spectacle, Gus said grimly. He wants everyone to watch him destroy us, turn it into entertainment. Or, Rose said slowly, he wants a crowd, and crowds can be unpredictable. Father O'Malley appeared in the doorway, having ridden up behind Rose. I brought the baptismal records, and something else. He held up a sheaf of papers, letters, correspondence between Thomas Holloway and the Territorial Land Office from 1879. Found them in the church archives? They reference the partnership, name you specifically as co-owner of the original venture. Will Sutherland accept them? Emma asked. If we can get them entered as evidence before he shuts us down, the priest said, which means we need a legal argument he can't dismiss outright. Gus studied the documents, the patent, the baptismal book, the letters, Rose's ledger, pieces of a puzzle that should fit together, should prove everything, but only if they could force a corrupt judge to look at them honestly. We need leverage, Gus said finally. Something Thornwood fears more than he wants that land. In his reputation, Rose said, it's all he has. Strip that away, and he's just a man who cheats orphans. How do we strip it in front of a judge he owns? Emma looked at the papers spread across the table. At the three adults, working angles, seeking loopholes. Then she remembered what Gus had said at the river. Your father gave you a weapon. We don't convince the judge, she said quietly. They turned to her. We convince everyone else. The cattle auction grounds sat on the eastern edge of town, a wide dirt lot ringed by fence rails where ranchers gathered twice a year to buy and sell livestock. Today, the pens were empty. Instead, wooden benches had been arranged in rows facing a makeshift platform where Judge Sutherland sat behind a borrowed desk, looking profoundly uncomfortable with the arrangement. Over 200 people filled the space. Ranchers and their wives, shopkeepers, miners in from the hills, children perched on fence rails. This wasn't a trial, it was a spectacle, exactly as Thornwood intended. Emma sat beside Gus in the front row, hands folded in her lap. She wore her blue wool dress, hair neatly braided, the picture of a well-cared-for child. Behind them, Rose Chen and Father O'Malley occupied the second row, their evidence carefully organized in leather satchels. Thornwood sat across the aisle with his lawyer, a thin man from Helena, with wire spectacles and a pinched mouth. Behind them, Marshal Garrett stood with arms crossed, his deputy beside him. The morning sun climbed higher, warming the air. Somewhere a meadowlark sang. Spring was coming, slow but certain. Judge Sutherland banged a gavel on the desk. Court is now in session. Territory versus Augustus Brennan, charged with kidnapping, custodial interference, and fraud. He looked at Gus over his spectacles. How do you plead? Not guilty, Your Honor. Gus stood, his voice carrying across the lot. On all counts. So noted. Sutherland gestured to Thornwood's lawyer. Prosecution may begin. The lawyer stood, smoothing his coat. Your Honor, this case is straightforward. Mr. Silas Thornwood, acting in his capacity as executor of the Territorial Orphan Receivership Program, was legally appointed guardian of Emma Grace Holloway following the deaths of both parents. Mr. Brennan has unlawfully detained the child for 6 weeks, refusing multiple lawful orders to surrender her to proper care. He pulled documents from his folder, approached the judge's desk. Here, the death certificates for Thomas and Margaret Holloway, the guardianship appointment signed by Mrs. Holloway 3 days before her death, the receivership documentation, all properly notarized and filed with the Territorial Land Office. Sutherland examined the papers, nodding. These appear in order. Furthermore, the lawyer continued, Mr. Brennan has made wild accusations against my client, claiming fraud and forgery without a shred of evidence. He's produced a so-called land patent that he claims grants him guardianship, a document whose authenticity is highly suspect, given Mr. Brennan's clear financial interest in the child's inheritance. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Emma felt Gus tense beside her. Your Honor, the lawyer said, we ask that you order the immediate surrender of Miss Holloway to Mr. Thornwood's lawful custody, and that Mr. Brennan be held in contempt for his continued defiance of the law. And Sutherland looked at Gus. Do you have representation, Mr. Brennan? Representing myself, Your Honor. Very well. Your response? Gus stood slowly. He didn't approach the platform. Instead, he turned to face the crowd. 200 faces, watching, judging. That guardianship deed is a forgery, Gus said simply. Margaret Holloway was unconscious when she supposedly signed it. Father O'Malley was at her bedside. He'll testify to that under oath. The priest rose. I will, Your Honor. My baptismal records show hearsay, Thornwood's lawyer interrupted. The priest has no legal standing to contest a notarized document. As I have church records, Father O'Malley insisted. Official documentation, inadmissible, without proper authentication from the Territorial Archive. The lawyer's smile was thin. Your Honor, this is precisely the kind of desperate obfuscation we expected. Mr. Brennan is grasping at straws. Sutherland nodded. The court finds Father O'Malley's testimony insufficient to overcome properly notarized legal documents. Do you have anything else, Mr. Brennan? The land patent, Gus said. Original deed from 1879, naming Thomas Holloway and myself as partners. Clause 3 assigns guardianship to me in the event of Thomas's death. He pulled the document from his coat, held it up. The crowd leaned forward, straining to see. May I examine that? Sutherland asked. Gus approached the platform, handed it over. The judge studied it for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he looked at Thornwood's lawyer. This appears authentic, Sutherland said slowly. Objection. The lawyer stood. That document predates the mother's guardianship appointment by 3 years. Her wishes, as expressed in her signed deed, supersede any prior arrangement. Furthermore, we question whether that patent is genuine or a recent fabrication designed to support Mr. Brennan's fraudulent claims. It's genuine, Gus said. Thomas gave it to his daughter for safekeeping. She had it in her possession when she came to my ranch. So you claim. The lawyer's voice dripped skepticism. A child's word against documented legal proceedings. Your Honor, this is absurd. Sutherland set down the patent. I'm inclined to agree, Mrs. Holloway's guardianship appointment is more recent and more specific. It supersedes... Wait, Emma stood. Her voice was small but clear in the sudden silence. I have something to say. Sutherland frowned. Young lady, this is not... Let her speak, someone called from the crowd, the blacksmith's wife. She's got a right. Others joined in, a murmur building to a rumble. Sutherland's gavel banged twice, but the crowd didn't quiet until Emma stepped forward. She walked to the center of the space between the benches and the platform where everyone could see her, where her voice would carry. My name is Emma Grace Holloway, she said. I'm 9 years old. My mother died when I was 8. My father died 3 months later. She paused, gathering courage. Mr. Thornwood killed him, gasps. Thornwood shot to his feet. This is outrageous. I saw it happen, Emma continued, louder now. At Sweetwater Creek, November 3rd. Papa had found evidence that Mr. Thornwood was stealing land from orphans. He was going to expose it. So Mr. Thornwood met him at the creek and stabbed him and pushed him in the water and held him down until he stopped moving. The crowd erupted. Sutherland's gavel pounded uselessly. Lies! Thornwood's face was purple. Your Honor, the child is clearly disturbed, traumatized. I know what I saw, Emma said. She turned to face him directly. You said to Papa, should have stayed out of my business, Thomas. And then you killed him, and you've been trying to steal my land ever since. Marshal Garrett stepped forward. Even if that's true, and I'm not saying it is, there's no evidence. No witnesses besides the child. A judge can't convict on that alone. No, Rose Chen said, standing. She pulled out her ledger, held it high. But you can investigate. 12 orphans in 18 months, Marshal. All lost their land through Mr. Thornwood's receivership. All sold at auction. All ended up in his hands within weeks. She opened the ledger, read aloud. Sarah Mitchell, age 7, parents died of fever, land seized for abandonment, sold to Jay. Pritchard, resold to Thornwood 5 days later. Timothy Cross, age 11. She read the whole list. 12 names, 12 stories, 12 properties, worth a combined $50,000, all flowing to the same man. When she finished, the crowd was silent. Coincidence, Thornwood's lawyer said, but his voice lacked conviction. 12 coincidences? Father O'Malley stepped forward. Your Honor, I performed last rites for 6 of those parents. Good people, God-fearing people. And now their children are scattered to the wind while their land lines Mr. Thornwood's pockets. The man stood in the back row, one of the miners. My brother lost his claim that way. Thornwood said he owed back taxes, sold it at auction before my brother could even get to town to contest it. Another voice. Same thing happened to the widow Morrison. Said she was incompetent to manage property. Took her ranch. More voices joined. A woman whose father's farm had been seized. A rancher who'd been forced to sell at a loss. One by one, the crowd turned from spectators to witnesses, their stories painting a picture of systematic theft. Sutherland banged his gavel. Order! This is a legal proceeding, not a town hall. Then let's make it legal, Gus said. He pulled another document from his coat, the letters Father O'Malley had found. These are correspondence between Thomas Holloway and the Territorial Land Office, dated 1879. They reference our partnership explicitly. They prove the patent is genuine. He handed them to Sutherland. The judge read, his face growing pale. And this, Rose said, approaching the platform with a single sheet of paper, is a credit slip for my mercantile, signed by Margaret Holloway 6 months before her death. Notice the signature. She laid it beside Thornwood's guardianship deed. The handwriting wasn't even close. Sutherland stared at the 2 documents. The crowd pressed closer, necks craning to see. Even from a distance, the difference was obvious. Margaret's real signature was flowing, elegant. The forgery was cramped, Uncertain. That proves nothing, Thornwood's lawyer said desperately. Handwriting changes with illness, with death? Rose's voice cut like a blade. Because according to Father O'Malley's records, Margaret Holloway was already dead when your deed says she signed it. 3 days dead, in fact. The crowd exploded. Shouts, curses, demands for justice. Marshal Garrett's hand moved to his pistol, but he didn't draw. His eyes were on Thornwood, and for the first time, Emma saw doubt there. Thornwood stood frozen, his face ashen. His lawyer gathered documents frantically, trying to salvage something from the wreckage. Then a new voice cut through the chaos. I can verify the handwriting. Everyone turned. A small man in spectacles pushed through the crowd, the bank clerk from Helena, the one who'd accompanied Thornwood to the ranch that first day. My name is Gerald Pritchard, he said. I'm a notary and handwriting expert. I've authenticated documents for the territorial court for 15 years. He approached the platform, examined both signatures. This is a clear forgery. The letter formation, the pressure points, the flow, they're completely different hands. Sutherland looked at Thornwood. Mr. Thornwood, do you wish to respond to these allegations? For a long moment, Thornwood said nothing. Then his mask cracked, his shoulders slumped. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. It wasn't supposed to go this far, he said. Thomas was going to ruin everything. The railroad deal, the land contracts, everything I'd built. I just wanted him to stop asking questions. But he wouldn't. He kept digging, kept threatening to expose. He trailed off, realizing what he'd said. The silence was absolute. Marshal Garrett drew his pistol. Silas Thornwood, you're under arrest for murder, fraud, and conspiracy to defraud. The federal courthouse in Helena was nothing like the cattle auction grounds. Marble floors, oak paneling, a real judge's bench with the territorial seal mounted above it. Emma sat in the gallery beside Rose Chin, watching the proceedings with quiet attention. It had taken a week to transfer Thornwood to federal custody, another 2 weeks for the territorial prosecutor to build the case. But now, in early May, with wildflowers blooming outside the courthouse windows, justice was finally grinding forward. The charges were read: murder, fraud, conspiracy, forgery, theft of property, 12 counts for the orphans, 1 count for Thomas Holloway's death. The evidence was overwhelming. Rose's ledger, the forged deed, handwriting analysis, and Thornwood's own confession, witnessed by 200 people. The jury deliberated for 40 minutes. Guilty on all counts. Judge Morrison, no relation to Thornwood's poker partner, sentenced him to 20 years in the territorial prison. His assets would be seized, the stolen properties returned to their rightful owners or heirs. Thornwood's face was gray as he was led away in chains. He didn't look at Emma, didn't look at anyone, just shuffled out like a man who'd already died inside. Emma felt nothing, no triumph, no satisfaction, just a quiet sense of something ending. The adoption hearing was held the same afternoon in a smaller courtroom down the hall. This time, Gus sat beside Emma at the petitioner's table, both of them scrubbed clean and dressed in their Sunday best. Judge Morrison reviewed the documents: the land patent, Thomas's letters, Father O'Malley's testimony about the guardianship clause, Rose's character witness statement. Even Marshal Garrett had submitted a letter supporting the adoption. Miss Holloway, the judge said gently, do you understand what adoption means? Yes, sir, Emma said. It means Mr. Brennan becomes my legal father. I become his legal daughter. And is this what you want? Emma looked at Gus. He looked back, those gray eyes patient as stone, kind as summer sun. Yes, sir, she said. It's what my papa wanted too. The judge signed the papers. Then by the authority vested in me by Montana Territory, I declare Emma Grace Holloway to be the legal daughter of Augustus Brennan. May God bless you both. The gavel fell. Emma Grace Brennan walked out of the courthouse holding her father's hand. The spring branding came 2 weeks later. Every rancher within 50 miles attended, partly for the work, partly for the celebration. The Brennan Ranch was whole again. Its herd increased by the 200 head that had been Emma's inheritance, now merged with Gus's operation under joint ownership. The branding iron heated in the fire pit, glowing orange as sunset. Gus lifted it carefully, approached the first calf. The Brennan bee seared into hide, smoke rising sharp and acrid. One by one, the cattle were marked. Emma helped where she could, opening gates, herding calves, learning the rhythm of ranch work that would be her life now. When the last calf was branded, Gus plunged the iron into the water barrel. Steam hissed. The sun hung low on the horizon, painting everything gold. Got something for you, he said to Emma. He led her to the small cemetery plot beyond the barn where 3 graves stood. His wife Sarah, his infant daughter, and now Thomas Holloway, properly buried with a carved headstone. Emma knelt, placed the pieces of her broken doll on her father's grave. The porcelain caught the dying light, blue dress still bright despite the cracks. Thank you, Papa, she whispered, for the gift. for knowing what I'd need, for trusting him with me. The wind rustled through new grass. Somewhere, a calf bawled for its mother. Gus's hand settled on her shoulder. You ready? Emma stood. For what? Sunday dinner. Rose is bringing half the town. Father O'Malley's saying grace. Billy's trying to cook, which means we'll probably need backup plans. He smiled. Your first official meal as a Brennan seems like something worth marking. Emma looked at the graves, at the ranch house, with smoke rising from its chimney, at the land, stretching green and endless under a sky going purple with dusk. Can I call you Papa now? She asked one final time. Gus knelt, bringing his face level with hers. I'd be honored, daughter. She threw her arms around his neck. He held her tight. This man who'd opened his door to a frozen child and found himself with family again. You kept your promise, Emma whispered. I'm safe. Always, Gus said. Long as I'm breathing, you're safe. They walked toward the house together. Behind them, the last light touched the broken doll, making it gleam like treasure. 30 years later, 1913. Emma Grace Morrison, married now with children of her own, returned to the old Brennan ranch. Her daughter Clara, 9 years old, walked beside her through spring grass that reached their knees. The iron gate still stood, black metal warm in May sunshine. Emma touched it gently, the way she did every time she came home. The metal that had burned frost-nipped skin that winter night was gentle now, heated by a sun that promised summer. Why do you always do that, Mama? Clara asked. Remembering, Emma said simply. Inside the ranch house, she found her father's journal in the desk where he'd left it. The last entry, written a week before he died at age 86, saved that girl, and she saved me right back. Reckon that's what family does. Keeps saving each other till one of you can't no more. Winter don't last forever. Even the coldest iron gets warm come spring. Thomas, if you're listening, I kept my promise. Your daughter's got a good life. She's got family. She's got land that's truly hers. That's all a man can hope for, I figure. That the ones he loves survive him well. Emma closed the book. Through the window, Clara chased a calf through the paddock, laughing. The Brennan bee marked its hide. 4 generations now of cattle bearing that brand. Standing for more than property. Standing for promises kept. For orphans finding home. For winter ending. For gates that burned with cold becoming warm with welcome. Emma walked outside. The meadowlarks were singing. Clara called for her to come see the new foal. The land stretched green and endless, bought with courage, held with love. She touched the gate one final time, not cold now, never cold in May, and walked toward the sound of her daughter's laughter. Behind her, the gate swung shut, gentle as a benediction.